It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined again by Pete Peterson. He is a nominee for California Secretary of State running as a Republican. Sir, I have to ask you about the idea that popped out of the LA City Ethics Commission.
Yes.
Some are calling it voteria. It's essentially a proposal whereby the city of Los Angeles would hold a lottery. Right. And anyone who votes in an election will be subject to the lottery, and your name can get pulled out if you vote, and you could win, I don't know, $50,000.
So I'm very excited about the fact that LA is looking at this issue and that we're having a discussion around civic engagement. I mean, the premise of my campaign has really been about improving not only just civic engagement as participation, but making sure voters are more informed. So I would say the word that's come out of the Ethics Commission is an attempt to address participation, but it doesn't look at informed participation.
Well stated, although you've heard the expression, the masses are asses, and
I have not heard that.
Well, you know, from like the 18th century,
I know.
whoever it was, and so, you know, there's no IQ test when someone votes.
Right.
So I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
but let's go back, though, to the mere act of participation.
Yes.
Look, I'm sure when you heard this idea, like when I heard this idea, I thought it was the goofiest thing I ever heard, and what were they thinking?
Yeah.
But then I started thinking, and I know you did the same.
Yeah.
Like, well, wait a second. I mean, maybe there's something here.
So we've done research at Pepperdine on this issue,
Please.
Why voters don't vote. There's actually information from the Census Department about this issue, and we've looked at it at Pepperdine. And unfortunately, some of the solutions coming out of the Ethics Commission don't really address some of the problems. So there are issues around voters. One of the big issues related to voters not voting is they didn't know that it was election day. And in LA, as we know, there are some structural issues around the timing of elections that I really think are much more fundamental.
For our viewers who don't live in the Los Angeles area, LA has a primary, essentially the March after the presidential election.
Right.
And so there's a lot of voter fatigue.
Right, so it's not only off year, it follows a very highly publicized election, and it's at a time of year, March, and then with the general soon following, that most voters aren't even thinking about elections.
We also know that when we look at the whole concept of voting, there are some folks who believe my vote doesn't matter.
Right, good point.
A friend of ours who we interview often, a gentleman named Mike Spence. He is a West Covina council member. I'm not sure if you know, but he won his election by 2 votes.
Okay.
That's stunning.
Yes.
West Covina is not a tiny city,
Right.
you know, over 100,000. So everyone's vote does count.
Well, and didn't we see that in the statewide election as well? So
tell us about it. Tell us about the controller's race.
So in political science terms, the view that my vote really won't have an impact is called rational ignorance. And I've said for some time that the way that you fight rational ignorance is you tell the stories like Mike Spence. You tell the story about what happened just this year with the controller's race, where you had a statewide election, millions of votes cast, and it came down to several hundred votes determining who made it on to the general election.
The difference between second and third place was 1/100th of a percent.
That's right.
So Betty Yee advances. The Speaker of the Assembly, outgoing Speaker of the Assembly, does not advance.
Right.
But let's back up for a second, given that you are an expert. When I heard of this idea of cash for votes, again, it's through a lottery, I thought, is that even legal?
Right.
And apparently it is.
Right. So the paying directly for votes, especially paying for votes made in for a certain candidate or a certain ballot measure, that is illegal. The providing of benefits for people who may cast a vote, that is legal. So
that's amazing to me.
Yeah.
We know we've seen the In-N-Out coupons, the Dunkin' Donut coupons.
Right. Starbucks did it with a cup of coffee if you showed up with your I voted sticker. So I actually think in those areas where you're finding partners as retailers that are promoting voting leading up to Election Day, I actually think it helps. I think that's a good thing when they're saying, hey, several weeks out from the election, we're going to be giving you a free hamburger or a free cup of coffee on Election Day. That actually helps voters know that Election Day is coming, which addresses, again, a real issue around voter participation.
So when I was in high school, I was on a short exchange program in Belgium. And I was fascinated to learn while I was there, I was kind of a political geek even back then, that they have mandatory voting.
Right.
I understand you have a relative
Yeah.
who's in a nation
Right.
that has mandatory voting. Tell us about your relative.
Right. So my dad lives in Australia. He's an expat, has lived there for some time, and they have mandatory voting there as well. I think in the United States, we've always put such a historic value on citizenship and personal choice that the combination between those two, I don't think that that's a direction that we're going to go or really should go. But I think at the same time, governments can be doing things more creatively to make sure voters are better informed and better engaged.
I probably am showing some naivete. I explained this to you before we got on, but I have to ask you.
Yeah.
I pay all my bills online.
Right.
Everyone I know pays their bills online.
Right.
Hundreds of millions of thousands of billions of dollars
Right.
are being traced online.
Yeah.
If the nation is willing to have the entire economy online, why can't we ease voting
Yeah.
by allowing elections online?
Well, there are a couple challenges to that. One is technological. You know, there have been some municipalities that have experimented with it. There was a famous experiment done in DC with online voting in which the system was hacked by a group of computer scientists from the University of Michigan.
Okay.
That when a voter came online, that it played the Michigan fight song. And so we just have a story in the news just recently about the Russians apparently hacking into a bank system. I think there really are legitimate concerns about security that we have not really solved yet.
Fair enough. What about extending voting hours?
Yes.
And or extending the days with which
Yeah.
you can vote?
I am a big supporter of that. I think we do need to be looking at ways to make voting, the times in which people vote, more available to them. But that can only happen, and I hope the viewers see this, when we have better technology in the polling place. Once we have better technology in the polling place, then we can extend hours. But currently, the system that we use, which is known affectionately as Incavote,
Right.
that actually, with that system, there's no security there to open up earlier voting hours.
Speaking of polling places, I remember as a kid, my dad would take me to the polling place, which was right down the street.
Yeah.
But that was a time when hours of employment were more set.
Yeah.
People tended to live close to
Right.
where they work.
Right.
Now people can commute an hour or two, and they
Yeah.
literally can't get to the polling place near their home
Right.
from 7 in the morning to 8 at night. It just won't work.
Right.
Could we create a system whereby you could vote wherever you
Yeah.
are on that day?
Right, and so this is happening in other states, Brad, and again, it relates directly to what kind of technology that we're using in the voting place. So when you have that ability through touchscreen voting systems, for
Right.
example, to do that, you dramatically expand the places where you can vote. And so other states, they actually go to, and this has been a recommendation actually from the White House, regional voting centers.
Right.
So you can place, if you have the voting machine and you put in your zip code and identification, it pops up the ballot that relates directly to you
Even if you're in a different
outside
county.
of your district. Right, exactly right. And so we're moving in that direction.
We're
LA
California.
County,
Come on, Pete. We're
I know.
California.
And that's-
Why is it that other states are more advanced on this point?
And especially on the
Silicon
issue-
Valley. Come
Exactly
on.
right, and that's-
Pepperdine. What's going
Well,
on?
and that's really the big reason why I'm running, because my background is in technology. I think many of the problems that we have here in the state, as ironic as it is, Brad, relate to the misuse and poor use of technology to inform and engage voters, and I'm about changing that.
How's the race going?
Well, good. I mean, we've had our first independent poll back. We're very competitive. We would say we're up by 3 points right now, and so I think there's a great opportunity.
He
here.
is Pete Peterson. He is a nominee for California Secretary of State. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's California Edition.